A black mark appears where no one expected it, not carved proudly above a gate, not stamped on a royal charter, but hidden among the ruins of a forgotten archive, where the last fragments of an old order seem to have outlived the men who served it. Some called it a seal. Others whispered that it was a map, a route, a warning. And behind it stood one question. Did the Knights Templar die protecting treasure, forbidden knowledge, or something far more dangerous? An illusion powerful enough to survive them? To follow that question, we have to move carefully. Not every mark is a code. Not every silence hides a conspiracy. But history has a strange habit of leaving gaps exactly where imagination is most eager to enter. Tonight, we begin with the legend of the Black Sigil, a symbol said to point toward a hidden Templar route, though no proven Templar map of this kind has ever been found. That absence matters. It does not kill the story. It changes the shape of it. Because sometimes the most enduring mysteries are not built from evidence alone, but from fear, ambition, missing records, and the human need to believe that ruined powers never vanish completely. Before we venture further into the shadows, take a moment to subscribe, so you never miss a secret that history has tried to forget. And as we begin, leave a comment letting us know where in the world you are watching from tonight. It's a reminder of how far these forgotten echoes can reach. So let us enter the archive slowly, not as treasure hunters, but as investigators. The mark is waiting. The question is whether it was ever meant to be read. Chapter 2. Knights beneath the Temple Mount. Jerusalem in the early 12th century was not a quiet holy city resting peacefully after victory. It was a prize taken by force, held with anxiety, and surrounded by roads where devotion could become a death sentence. Pilgrims came from Europe believing they were walking toward the center of the world. For many, the journey ended at the places they had heard named in sermons since childhood. The Holy Sepulchre, the Mount of Olives, the streets where sacred history seemed to press against ordinary stone. But reaching Jerusalem did not mean reaching safety. The roads that led inland from the coast were exposed, difficult, and often violent. A traveler who had survived the sea could still be robbed, captured, or killed before ever kneeling at the shrine he had crossed half the known world to see. It was in this uneasy landscape that the first Templars appeared. At the beginning, they did not look like the rich and feared order later generations would imagine. They were not yet the owners of castles, estates, treasuries, or banking networks. They were a small brotherhood of knights, traditionally associated with Hugues de Payens and a handful of companions, who offered a strange and powerful idea. They would live as religious men, bound by vows, but they would also bear arms. Their purpose was practical before it was legendary. They would help protect Christian pilgrims moving through the dangerous roads of the Crusader kingdom. That combination mattered. Medieval Europe understood monks. It understood warriors. But a man who tried to be both at once occupied a more unusual space. The Templar was expected to renounce ordinary personal ambition, yet he trained for violence. He was asked to obey, pray, endure discipline, and fight. To modern ears, this may sound contradictory. To the world of the Crusades, it began to seem almost necessary. The kingdom needed defenders. Pilgrims needed protection. The church needed a way to speak about war without making it feel like simple bloodshed. The Templars grew inside that tension. Their early home gave them a name that would prove more powerful than anyone could have planned. The rulers of Jerusalem granted them quarters on the Temple Mount, in the area associated by Christians with the ancient Temple of Solomon. Their headquarters stood near one of the most charged religious landscapes on earth, a place sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, layered with conquest, memory, scripture, and loss. From that association came the name by which they became famous, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The phrase poor would not age well, but at first it carried meaning. The early Templars presented themselves as humble protectors, men who had given up private wealth for a collective mission. Their seal, later remembered in many forms, was sometimes said to show two knights on one horse, an image often interpreted as a sign of poverty, brotherhood, or shared purpose. Whether every later reading of that image is too neat is another matter. Symbols rarely behave politely once centuries begin handling them. Still, the image captures how the order wished to be seen: disciplined, self-denying, useful, and united. What made the Templars different was not only where they lived, but what their location allowed others to imagine. The Temple Mount was already a place where history and scripture overlapped so heavily that the ground itself seemed to invite interpretation. To place a military order, there was to put armed men inside a landscape filled with sacred expectation. Later storytellers would look back at this detail and see an opening. If the Templars lived near the site of the ancient temple, then surely they must have found something. If they guarded pilgrims above ground, perhaps they searched below it. If they became rich and secretive later, perhaps the source of that power had been hidden in the earth from the beginning. That is the mechanism by which many legends are born. A real fact sits quietly at the center. The Templars were based on the Temple Mount. Around it gathers possibility. Possibility hardens into rumor. Rumor acquires details. Details begin to sound like memory. The evidence for a secret discovery under the Temple Mount is thin. It is not the kind of claim we can responsibly treat as established history. But the legend endured because it solved, in a dramatic way, a real puzzle people felt when looking at the Templars. How did a small group of armed pilgrims become one of the most influential institutions in medieval Christendom? The less romantic answer is slower and more interesting. They became powerful because their mission fit the needs of their age.